welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. We're here at the very beautiful Connecticut River Museum in Essex today. The fine folks have welcomed us into their home, and first up it's the interim director and also the founding director, Brenda Makovsky, and the titles are confusing in and of themselves, but we'll get to that. First of all, thank you for having us here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. We love to share the museum with Connecticut's public.
Let's talk about the Connecticut River Museum. For those who haven't been here and who aren't familiar with it, what is it?
It's the only regional museum devoted to looking at the Connecticut River as a great transportation artery. Next year, we are going to celebrate our 40th anniversary.
Wow.
So we have been open to the public for not quite 40 years because it took us a while to restore this building. But we've been delivering public programming and exhibitions and research and publications for a good long time. So it's nice to have an opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful, and it's at the very least 3 floors once you're in the main building here, right? Talk about, and each floor has, there's a different significance to it and also a different time frame, like compared to, we're on the 2nd floor right now as we shoot this. Talk about that a little bit.
That's right. This was actually a warehouse built in 1878 for the steamboat traffic on the Connecticut River. And so there's a cargo hatch. When visitors come, they can see the cargo hatch where goods were stored on the 2nd and 3rd floor. The 2nd floor is actually devoted to looking at the resources of the Connecticut River. So if you think of it as a waterway and you think of the goods that traveled on it, in the early period, there's agriculture. And then in the sort of the industrial period, it's quarry stone, whether it's from Portland brownstone. And then industrial products like the bits and augers, Colt guns, ivory from the ivory cutting industry in Deep River and Ivoryton. So the river really was the water highway and made the development of Connecticut and in many ways our nation possible.
It's interesting that depending on the time period, how the goods that were transferred changed so significantly over the course of time. It changed with the times, right?
That's right, that's right. The early story is one of agriculture, and it was really agriculture that developed shipbuilding because farmers needed to move their products. So shipbuilders built small vessels, and the early markets were other coastal cities, but also the islands and the West Indies. And so we developed shipbuilding, particularly in the lower part of the Connecticut River where the soil is not as good as it is, for example, in Wethersfield, which is part of the Great Central Valley.
So the closer you are to the shoreline, the less good the soil is?
Correct.
Okay.
Actually, from Middletown south, it's a totally different valley than it is to the north. If you remember your history, Glacial Lake Hitchcock sat in the valley between Rocky Hill and Lyme, New Hampshire, that created a broad and very fertile valley that turned out to be great for Connecticut Valley tobacco, in addition to all kinds of other crops.
Now, Connecticut River, you know, from one end, it's in Long Island Sound, and it goes all the way up to Canada, correct?
That's right.
And we're sitting here, is this a unique location, right, in the Essex area? Because you're almost at the mouth of the river, right? You're close.
We're 6 miles north of the mouth, and it's still part of the estuary. So although the salt content, the brackishness of the water is changing. It's brackish here. And we still, fortunately, we have a lot of water storage so that when there's great floods, you know, that bottles up in Middletown goes underwater, we have a lot of estuary water storage here, which often is helpful for us. So it's a beautiful part of the river.
By the way, how was it when Superstorm Sandy came through, by the way? How did it handle it? What was it like here?
Well, the Connecticut River Museum had 18 inches of water all over the first floor.
You would think a place like that would be able to handle it, but yeah.
Well, it's interesting. The original warehouse floor, which is on the first floor, did fine. It was all the new floors that had to be replaced.
See, there's something to be said about, you know, the older stuff, you know, it lasts longer or whatever,
That's right. It had already been here a couple of hundred years and was well seasoned. But through the, you know, we had very good support from the community, from the local fire department, from we created a flood fund right away and were able to repair and open. Actually, we opened a year ago in time for the train show. That was the reason to hurry.
And speaking of which, the third floor of this fine Connecticut River Museum is all about trains, isn't it?
Steve Cryan has moved in. It's not quite open yet, but he's going to open on November 21st.
And by the time this show airs, maybe it will be open. So if you're thinking about coming down, it may be there for you.
That's right. This is the 25th anniversary, so this is an extravagant year. It's a 26-foot layout with just hundreds and hundreds of both buildings and people and boats, and it's really something to see. And Steve is going all out this year.
And he has the place to himself. And even if you didn't think you were interested in some of the stuff here at the Connecticut River Museum, if you're a train fan, you should come just for that. It's an entire floor dedicated to you. It's massive too. So.
That's right, and it's a large draw for families, for people with young children, and they can come and visit the ride on the Essex Steam Train at the Valley Railroad, and then come over and visit the tiny trains here at the Connecticut River Museum.
Let's get a little bit more in depth into, I look around, we're on the second floor here now. I see bridges, I see things like yachting, I see safe passage. Talk about some of the stuff that we see here.
We're kind of sitting in the steamboat area, which is extremely important. When steamboats came on the river in 1823, suddenly you could navigate against the tide and against the wind. It meant that storekeepers in Hartford could get their goods on time, and farmers could deliver their fish to the Fulton Fish Market before they went bad.
It was a game changer. It really was.
Certainly was.
Yeah.
And so we spend a lot of time talking about both the small boats, and we're kind of sitting in the midst of the larger ones here. But steamboating is only one of the stories. We talk about shipbuilding, and those were largely wooden ships for that early period, both small coasting vessels for trade and then larger vessels that went to Europe. Of course, Saybrook Bar, the sand bar across the mouth of the Connecticut, meant that very large vessels went out light, and they never came back because they would have been too heavy to get or too deep to get over the bar.
Right.
So, but shipbuilding is a very important story for us, and we talk about that. We also have yachting. Once the steamboats ended and the waterfronts became available, then a host of small boating and yacht clubs developed all up and down the river, and recreation became the name of the game.
Yeah, it was all about fun at that point, right?
That's right.
Now, to this day, is there still commerce transported on the river, or have things changed?
It's very sad. As a matter of fact, we got all very excited the other day and ran to our windows because we saw the first barge that we had seen in, I would say, almost in 7 or 8 years. When I first came here, there used to be oil barges were a regular occurrence on the Connecticut. And then we would see cement barges and tugboats for big construction projects. But all of that has vanished, and it's so sad because when you think of traffic everywhere,
yeah,
there's nobody on the river,
right.
folks.
Listen, there's no traffic jams on this river
no,
anymore,
there's
right?
not. There's not.
But with the less shipping on the river, I would imagine ecologically it's probably better for the river, right? Would you say?
Yes, and of course the whole Connecticut River has been cleaned up since the Clean Water Act, and it's been named one of the lower Connecticut River is one of the last great places in the Northern Hemisphere, I believe. The Nature Conservancy named it that. So the water is not quite drinkable, but certainly swimmable, and so much better than it was when Abe Ribicoff first decided that we had to make a gateway region for the Connecticut River.
So talk about the process that someone would go through if they decide they want to take a trip to the Connecticut River Museum. The way that they would tour the facility here, is it just on their own, at their own leisure? Are there tour guides? I know that there are displays set up where you can read. How does that all work?
This is pretty much a self-guided museum unless you come with a tour. So there are text panels for each kind of section. There's a lot of audio and a lot of video. We have a great orientation film that Morley Safer narrated that kind of orients people to the river. But many of the exhibits have little sound sticks where you can hear the voices of the people that you might be looking at, or hear in detail and depth about what you're looking at. So we try to meet the kind of the needs of a variety of visitors. And we have some interactives for children. Downstairs we have a life-size model of the American turtle, the first submarine, and kids can get in that and try to propel it the way David Bushnell would have done it in 1776.
Nice. There's also, an outside to this facility too. You have docks, and I know that there's schools are involved in field trips and things of that sort. But talk about some peripheral things that people can be a part of here too.
We have there's lots of reader rails around the property where you can sort of orient yourself to Essex Village, because we're in a very historic village here. We have a walking map so that you can do that yourself. We're working now on a mobile tour so that you can download.
Oh, nice. You're with the technology, huh?
That's right.
Steamboats to apps on your smartphone now, right?
And we're working on one actually in connection with the next year in 2014 is the 200th anniversary of the burning of the fleet in Essex by the British during the War of 1812. And so that's what that particular tour is going to be about. But our schooner has just left for her winter berth, but there's often a boat at our dock that you can take around the harbor. And Bill Yule, who you'll be talking with shortly, is going to talk about those winter cruises.
Yeah, we should mention that Connecticut River Museum is open year-round, winter, summer, spring, fall, correct?
That's right, that's right. We're only closed on very major holidays. So
you are the founding director of the Connecticut River Museum, so talk about that a little bit. How did you get started?
Well, when I moved to town in 1972, this building had been a restaurant for about 40, maybe even more than 40 years, but it had been condemned by the state because of the water pollution, and so a group of people decided that they would save it, and not really sure what they were going to do with it, but over time people came forward and gave us collections and offered us collections if we ever got this place started. So it took us, we purchased it between 72 and 76 and couldn't open it until 82. It took us that long to restore it.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful museum. What started as a warehouse for cargo is really now a treasure house for Connecticut Valley objects.
And so you founded it, and you attempted at some point more than one time in your life to move on and try other things, and they kept dragging you back into here, right?
They
Which is
did,
where you are now.
But it was a great pleasure.
It was,
It's always been a great pleasure to be here and to watch it grow and change and
evolve into what it is
over
today.
time. That's true. That's true.
How do you give the website out so people can go and learn more there?
Sure. It's www.ctrivermuseum.org.
Brenda Makovsky, she is the founding director and also the interim director for now for the Connecticut River Museum. We've got a lot more to get to, so we'll take a break and come back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. We're here at the Connecticut River Museum in Essex. This time we have Bill Yule, who on his business card he's called an educator, but I'm not sure if you actually like that title that much, correct? Is that the title you'd prefer, or would you describe yourself better as something else?
I like to describe myself, Sean, as the educator naturalist of the Connecticut River Museum, because I really wear both those hats.
Now, what does that mean?
That means that sometimes I'm more a traditional educator teaching a class of young kids here in the museum, and other times I'm out on the river on a boat, either the Project Oceanology boat or our summer sailing boat, the Mary E., with a bunch of people, and I'm pointing out eagles and seals and more the natural history aspect. So that would be the naturalist hat. And then the educator hat is a little bit more directed towards formal kind of education.
That's great. So you're out on the river as much as you are inside the museum, correct?
It's a terrible job, but it is a job that I have to do, and it's all part of our philosophy of giving people an opportunity to connect to the river and all the great things about the river through the museum.
Do you think a place like this is necessary? There's a need for it. People should hold on to the knowledge of the history of how it all started, how it's evolved to what it is today.
Yeah, it's really a great opportunity because we're in a place that's almost like a portal to one of the most beautiful parts of the river, and people do not realize how extraordinary the beauty of this river is right here. If you think about it a little bit, we're within 100 miles of about 30 million people, and then you can be on this river in 20 minutes and feel like you're in the wilderness.
It's also a portal going back into time too, really.
Absolutely,
You know,
yeah.
and you know, we talked in the first segment about the 3 floors, and you know, there's a different time period downstairs compared to the steamboat section that we're in, trains upstairs. Let's get a little bit more into, well, you mentioned, you know, sometimes you're working with school kids. So does that mean there are a lot of field trips that are coming through here? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, great. So there's two really venues that we have for teaching here. Schools and classrooms come here by bus, and we teach right here at the museum, either in the museum or on the dock or on the water in one of our boats.
The kids
or
love that too.
we do outreach. We pack up a program and we go to your school and we teach a program at your school.
Is that, you know, schools that might not have the budget to be able to bring the kids out as often as they'd like?
We do like to serve the underserved populations. Sometimes we have a little bit of scholarship money to help underserved populations get here and get the benefit of this type of place-based education. And other times it's just because the curricula of that particular public school, it makes it easier for us to go to them for them.
Talk about the reaction that you get from the students when they're here and they're just, some of them you would imagine might be discovering some of this stuff for the first time, because you know, how much do they know about steamboats from way back in the day? Does it interest them? Is it something that they're like, wow, yeah, you know, they're enlightened?
It's very dramatic, and we get a huge range of reaction from kids from all over the state, and it's very surprising. Some kids act as if they have done this before, and maybe it's something that they're already comfortable with, and for other kids it's a brand new experience. It's a whole world opening up right in front of their eyes, and so that becomes very gratifying when you see kids experience that for the first time and their eyes get wider and they see things they haven't seen before.
It's fascinating. We're going to take another short break here, and we'll come back because we do have a lot more to get to with Bill Ewell, the Connecticut River Museum, one of the educators here. So we'll be right back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. I'm here with Bill Ewell, an educator here at the Connecticut River Museum. We were talking about the students. Now, when you get into, as far as field trips here, I would imagine that it has to be during the nicer weather, when you get out on the docks, get out on the boats, and you really do. You're out on the river, right?
We're on the river about 7 months of the year, Sean. And we do have a couple of hot seasons with public school trips, and that would be in the spring and the fall. And then in summer, we have summer camps for 6 weeks. We have 6 weeks of summer camp. Students come for a week at a time. We have 6 different subject areas we teach, and that's our summer program curriculum. And then for the regular school year, students come here anytime, but June, May are very hot spots in our curriculum.
It's close to when their semester's about to graduate or end.
Exactly, and then September and October. But we'll have students come for all their vacations during the school year. February vacation, we'll have a week of programming. And also, I'd like to talk just a little bit about what we do on the water, because that's a big part of how we connect people to the river. And one of the things is we have a partnership with Project Oceanology from Groton, and they come here with their research vessel in the wintertime, and we spend 6 weeks taking people out on the river to see wintering bald eagles and all the wildlife that comes to the Connecticut River to spend the winter, because the Connecticut River really has unique ecological characteristics that make it a good hospitable place for a lot of these really spectacular animals to spend the winter. So.
You know, we talked briefly with Brenda in the first segment about the ecology and about how this neck of the woods, it's cleaned up to the point and things are getting better. Does that mean species are coming back too? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's probably the greatest environmental success story that we have in this country, and that's two things. It's the return of the bald eagle, our national symbol, and it's the return of the rivers of America. Not only the Connecticut River, but many of the major rivers in America were so polluted in the 40s and 50s and 60s that they were the last place anyone wanted to live, and the species diversity was crashing. And then we had this sudden awakening in the late 1960s, early 1970s, the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, those things, and really the change in the way people conducted themselves made a tremendous difference in the water quality. The water quality allowed the animals to begin to come back. The river cleaning up made it suddenly a Gold Coast environment, and so real estate becomes valuable. People value the river. It's a really beautiful cascade effect when you do something as successful as we've done since 1972.
But is part of it, though, the lessening of commerce on the river itself?
You know, that's a very small part of it. Commerce was never really huge on this particular river because this river is blocked by a huge sandbar that makes deep water navigation difficult. So it's not like the Mississippi River or the Hudson River with a huge commercial
to this day,
traffic,
even, right?
To this day.
Yeah.
And so, although that was probably a small part of it, really the big part was the Industrial Revolution, the post-industrial revolution, when people treated rivers like sewerways.
You know, as an educator, it's got to make you feel good to be able to, when you're telling the story of the area, you can talk about it's getting better and not getting worse, and that's got to really make you feel good and proud too.
It's a pleasure, really.
Yeah.
It's a great part of the story, and it's the part of the story we always like to emphasize towards the end of every program, that the river is like the comeback kid. It was knocked down and it got back up, and it's because of us. It's because of what we decided to do in response to what we had done thoughtlessly, maybe not intentionally, but we recognized the problem, addressed the problem, and this river's made a great comeback.
If this is the feel-good story, well, how come in other areas, they can't take this as an example and go with it? Why? What are they doing differently? Why are they doing it wrong? Why can't they learn from this?
I can't really speak to any other particular geography, but there are different pressures on each waterway in America. If you have a large part of local economies that are based on industrial scale use of the river, it becomes more difficult to deal with the pollution problems.
Yeah.
Everyone tries to mitigate pollution, but here in the Connecticut River we've been very successful, probably because it's not quite as densely populated as many of the other rivers.
Bill Ewell from the Connecticut River Museum. It's been an education for us and a very pleasant one. We certainly encourage people to come down and experience it all year long, winter, summer, spring, or fall. Thank you again for having us at your place today. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean. A pleasure talking to you.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. We will see you next time. Take care.